Boom. I just hit record. Hey, everybody, this is Teddy Burriss. I work for a company called Burriss Consulting. I work for my wife. We're LinkedIn strategists, trainers, coaches, all about helping people master LinkedIn as a business tool. But this is our Wednesday show with my co-host, my good friend, Mr. Randy Wooden. Wave, Randy.
Hey, and Chan is wondering, why do I look so pink today? This is a tough crowd. I tell you, got no respect. You know what I mean? I come in here one day, I'm all whited out. Next week, I got the shade up and whatever. So, you know what? I may turn this camera around, Chan, just to give you the inside scoop. But yeah, so the light is a little bright. Randy Wooden, I work for Goodwill Industries of Northwest North Carolina. I run our professional center. So we help people do a better job of the job hunt. Typically, our clients are people with a degree, or maybe they have been in a salaried or leadership role. Maybe they aspire to that. Maybe they're just recently out of college, but our services are free. We're happy to help. And as you might expect, everything we do now is virtual. So I will say that we're happy to have you here. If you're so inclined, let us know where you're watching us from. Teddy is going to monitor the chat box astutely this week. Astutely. And I'm on a different monitor today, Chan. It's a different camera. It's got a whole lot more. It's got a whole lot more clarity to it than the other one. So we're experimenting with this high budget that we deal with. Let me introduce
Randy. Chan thinks she just got out of a long hot bath,
like a lobster. Well, it's. No, I've always had a bit of tint to my skin, and I could tell you off camera what I've encountered over the years a couple of times with that. It's kind of been an interesting conversation. But Sindy Martin joins us. Sindy with Smartin International, and Sindy, you've helped our professional center for many, many years in a whole host of areas with group discussions and mock interviews and teaching people how to conduct themselves more professionally. And so we're here to talk to Sindy today about Zoom and some things to be aware of, not just the lighting and whether you're pink and, whatever, but some of your facial expressions, those micro expressions. We're going to cover a lot of those topics. But first, let me turn it to Sindy. Why don't you introduce yourself? Let us know who you are.
My name is Sindy Martin. The company is Smartin International. Mm-hmm. I help people smarten up their professionalism, their professional excellence.
There you go.
And that's the whole ball of wax. That includes so many things, so many of them that we are going to talk about today.
Yeah, you bet. And if you have questions or comments for Sindy, please, again, chat those in the chat box. Teddy, you'll keep an eye on that. And where it's appropriate and where we have time, we're going to introduce those to our conversation. So please feel free to join in. We'd love to have you do that. Now, hey, Randy, Sindy, yeah.
Randy, wait a minute. I've only had 2 people out of 35,000 who have told us where they're from. That is unacceptable. We need to know where you're from. There's prizes involved here. So get your keyboard working and tell us what city, state, country, planet you're from. There we go. Ivory's in Greensboro. So good. Thanks, folks. Look, Mr. Eggleston showed up today.
There you go. So a trip to Hawaii. That's what. Yeah, is that the prize in the prize box this week, Teddy? I don't know, but
I'll have to go check, Randy. Todd, hang tight. I'll let you know.
Yeah, if that's in the budget, that'd be great. So we're getting some idea from where people are watching us from. Sindy, I ask everybody this right off the bat: why do you do what you do? What drove you? Was there a single instance, a series of events? Fill folks in on the passion behind why you're sitting there right now.
First of all, I was brought into it at birth. My father was a military career person, and so consequently in our family, we were taught very strongly in protocol. I knew how to have a 16-piece place setting, how to use one by the age of 3. So it was ingrained, and they sent me to finishing school in London and all that kind of thing. So I've always had it. But when it really hit me was when I was working in corporate America. I would go and visit colleges and universities. Yep. And there I was at their local Starbucks, right behind the students in their pajamas and their slippers, and just the way that they interacted with other people. And I went, we need some help here. So that's what got me into it.
Yeah. And it's one of those things that, and maybe just because I'm old, so Teddy, I'm old, so I'll
heard
talk
that.
louder for you too, because I know you need more volume on that. So I'm going to talk like that. But I think what I'll call old school rules or old protocol, everything from sending a thank you note to saying yes and please and thank you, and a lot of those things, eye contact, a lot of that stuff, it just seems like, now get off my lawn, but it sort of seems like a lot of that stuff has gone away. But you're saying, hey, it's still important. We need to pay attention to those details, right?
It does. It's one of those
Yeah.
things we notice about other people, but we don't look at ourselves. And I teach it, don't look too close. But it's something that we do notice, and that the people that are around us notice, and they may never say anything about it, but it does play a factor in whether or not you get that promotion, whether or not you get that job.
Sure. Well, again, if you've got questions, fire away in there, and Teddy, you keep an eye on that. So let's get started first of all with the topic of micro expressions to watch for. First of all, what is a micro expression?
Well, a micro expression it's a very quick facial expression that is just an automatic response. Everybody does this. It typically lasts for about 20 milliseconds, maybe up to a second. And it's just part of who we are. It's what happens in our body. So there's no control of it. And that's why our interviewers look for it.
So I understand the word micro. I'm a liberal arts guy, but I remember micro means small. So I get that. Give me an example. Show me something. I'm going to look for you right now. Now you show me something that is a micro expression. Just because what are they? Give me an example of that.
I just did.
I saw that like that. I get this a lot.
That is contempt. That is, why did he ask me that question?
Mm-hmm.
That's right. So only one side goes.
Interesting.
A nose flare. People that are angry, okay,
Mm-hmm.
your eyebrows naturally will go up when we're surprised, and we show the white of our eyes, and our mouth gets kind of loose, right? That's surprise. But when we're angry,
Mm-hmm.
we typically will put our lips together, press our lips together, and when we're angry, our eyebrows actually go in. When we are surprised, they go up. When we are fearful, they go up, but not in, like when you're angry. And it's just the slightest movement of going from angry to surprise to fear. But what our mouth does plays a part in it too. So someone may ask us, so why was it that you left XYZ company? And all of a sudden there's that slightest anger that comes,
like that.
And they're going to explore that. I'll say to somebody, when you do something and all of a sudden you hear the same question later on in the interview, be careful what you're doing, both with your gestures and the emotion that is being evoked. When many of us got laid off from corporations, especially back in 2008.
Sure.
So consequently, a lot of times when I would go for interviews back then, and the first time they said something about that company, so tell me about that company. I was like, it just automatically comes out because it's that emotion that's coming. So what we have to do is up here, we've got to work with our brain. We've got to work with the positive side of what happened in that situation. And that's what needs to be in your brain when that question comes up. Otherwise, we're going to show those micro expressions. So the top 7 that they look for are anger. Okay. Anger, fear, happiness, contempt, that one side going up, surprise. Oh, they know about that. Sadness, which typically is, we can tell when somebody's sad. The eyebrows go down, the mouth goes down. And then disgust. I mean, you ask me about somebody and it's, your lips go up, your nose flares. It's like, bleh.
And these are real quick, you say, just under a second or so.
They're under a second.
How schooled are interviewers in really picking this stuff? I mean, it'd be like handing me a rocket scientist book to read, and suddenly in 2 minutes, I'm a rocket scientist. You don't want me building your rocket to go to the moon. So, a little knowledge could be dangerous, I guess is my point. How schooled are people on this from the interview side of the desk?
It's extremely popular right now.
Is it really?
And there are more and more books on our gestures. And whether you realize it or not, we watch it. We've seen a lot of the politics lately, and we watch people when they're talking. So if their hands are down, it's negative. But if their hands are up and they're showing gestures where we see your thumbs, that's open. I want to be honest with you, I'm an honest person. Anything that we do can enhance or detract from our actual words that we're saying.
So Cindy, what I love about this conversation is that we really should look for ways to use as much of us as is in frame to help amplify our message, confirm our interests, confirm our uniqueness, our skills, and this is all I have to use right here. And which, to a certain extent, I'll offer this. I also feel that the fact that I stand, which I can't get my buddy to stand up, but the fact that I stand, I feel for me, it helps me to present myself better in frame. That's my new words for the day, in frame. What are your thoughts?
It's essential that you feel comfortable. And that's the most important thing, is being comfortable. We are all nervous, whether we're going to visit a client or we're being interviewed, same thing, right? We have that nervousness. We've got to use those breathing techniques. Breathe in 4 counts through your nose, wait 4 counts, breathe out 4 counts, do that. That oxygen's going to help us. So by walking or standing, you're actually getting more oxygen than when you're sitting in place.
It also helps another problem I have too, that chair sort of like makes me bigger. I don't know why, but it makes me, so anyway.
Depending on the type of chair you're in too, because if you're doing an interview and you happen to be sitting in a swivel chair and you fall into this habit of swiveling, or you're nervous, we may not be able to see that your foot is jiggling down there. Just make sure it doesn't get to your shoulder too.
Yeah.
Because that's another one of the things that we look for in body language is we look at someone and we try to get a feel for how they are and how they use gestures. But typically a shoulder going up like a shrug is a lie or not telling the whole truth. So we look for those things. And are they touching their ear? Are they touching their nose? Now, if you just happen to touch your nose because your nose itches, that's fine. But if you do that type of gesture after a pretty serious question, they're going, and they may come back and ask that question again. If you do the exact same move that you did previously, something's up.
I promise you, Cindy, I am not an embezzler. There's no way in the world you'd ever catch me being an embezzler.
I was watching not long ago. I was watching To Tell the Truth. They have a new school version of that. And they had a guy on last night who was a former CIA agent. He went overseas as a spy, infiltrated the Middle East, did a lot of this stuff. Anyway, he was not the actual person they were trying to pick out. But then they brought him back, and he and the other guy of the three that were left, then they did to tell the truth about him. And anyway, they had him on, they had him stick around for the rest of the show and give his impression of the other 2 or 3 rounds of To Tell the Truth. And he, not knowing who the real person was, he was able to pick out each time the person that was the actual person. And part of that was based on what you were talking about. The one guy is literally like this, and he looked like that, and just other ones, the way they came across, the tone of voice. There's so many little cues that if you're in tune to that stuff, it's almost like it's a little dangerous in some ways, because now you feel like you've got this superpower and you're invincible, and I can see right through you. And so that's interesting. A lot of things that go on sort of behind the scenes, but I'm glad to hear you say that more and more people now are studying this, as opposed to just saying, okay, I see this guy scratching his nose, therefore we don't want to hire him. I mean, that seems kind of abrupt, but maybe it's part of the overall mosaic. Would that be fair to say?
Yes.
That, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Overall look, because what they're doing is, they want to know that you're like them. And really, if you boil down interviewing to the top 2 things that they need is, can you do the job, and will the person do the job, right? Can you do it, and will you do it? Can be 2 different things. So that time is getting to know you. Can I work with this person? So we like people that are like us. So that's where using similar gestures as they do, talking at the same speed. If I come in and I'm talking about it, and they're saying, well, now we are a little laid back here, then it's not a match. And they're going to feel that energy.
Yeah. And Mindy had a question. We'll get to some of that in a bit here, Teddy,
I'll take care of it.
Yep. We're going to cover some of what I'll call the initial topics that people wondered about a year ago, meaning how far away from the camera, where should the angle be, what about the lighting, and so that it doesn't make you look like a lobster, or all of those things. We'll get to those. But today, a lot of this is going to be how to deal with artificial intelligence, the facial expressions, and what are some things that could get you derailed, even if you're qualified. If they get that bug that says, wait a second, something's not right here. In this day and age, there are plenty of candidates, and maybe that's the difference maker. And that's one of the things that I really appreciated about Sindy, is that you don't necessarily always focus on the skills and all of that piece. I mean, that's the applicant part, but you are more on the finer points, the behind the scenes, the hidden kind of stuff that is sensed, but maybe not deliberately delivered. See my thumbs up? See? So anytime, just keep it down, will you? All right. So top mistakes people make on Zoom. Go. What you got? Top mistakes.
First of all, we need to see all of you, and we need to be able to see your gestures, not your little fingers poking up occasionally. We need you to express yourself and be able to see the upper half of you. We do want good light. Now, does that mean you have to go out and buy an expensive ring light? No. Take a lamp, take the shade off of it, and put it behind your PC, okay? Your computer. Push the computer back so that we can see you. Put the lamp behind it. It's going to shed enough light on you that it's going to make it a little bit brighter. And you do want to have a more solid background on you. Both Teddy and Randy have solid backgrounds on them. I am using a background. Using a background like this with a green screen is fine, but if we move too fast, we see that there's green lines in there, so we have to be careful with that. The other is color. What color you have on. Now, of course, we want you to be dressed appropriately. Don't pick up your shirt out of the corner of the room and put it on. We do want you to look clean and pressed and have your hair brushed, have your face. Make sure there's not hair in your face. All right. So The other thing that we need to do, though, is think about the color that you're wearing. The Yale students did this test where they went to networking groups and each one of them wore a different color. And they went to several ones and they recorded how many people came up to them. What do you think was the number one color that attracted the most people?
Red.
Green.
Was-
Second was blue. Third was yellow. Guess what was at the very, very bottom of the list?
Gray,
White.
Red.
red.
Red was the bottom of the list.
And when asked, yes, and when asked, it was because it reminded them of death and blood. So much for that red power top, right?
Yale student.
These are Yale students. But gray was the next one up. I don't know what it is with designers in gray, but gray makes you just kind of fade into the wall. But blue is the most calming color.
Mm-hmm.
So a nice blue jacket or maybe a blue shirt. There's many different shades of blue, but green, blue, and yellow are the top colors that attracted the networkers. And if you think about it, the next time you go into an office, take a look at the color. A lot of doctors' offices are blue because it keeps people calm.
That's a good idea.
My parole officer is a blue. All his walls are blue.
Now, the other thing that people do is we all, especially if you're going to be on Zoom for a while, we need to be drinking something, but we've got to be aware of how we're drinking it. Okay. So if I have my big old jug of water, which I try to drink 4 of these a day, and I'm glugging it down, that's not very professional. So if I'm on Zoom, I'm going to have a smaller glass and I'm going to take a sip of water, not be glugging down my huge big
Pinky
thing.
extended too, right? Pinky, right? There you go.
Extended, yeah.
Or a coffee cup. All right. So because you don't want that. And no eating. Do not eat while you're on there. Okay. If you're going to eat beforehand or eat after, but do not eat unless it is a lunch Zoom. Bad news. The other is be careful with what you have on. Jewelry, sounds in your room. You know, we all know to keep our mute on until we do talk and to use, raise our hands. Don't just inject your words over somebody else. Ask to speak. May I share something with you? Instead of just blurting ahead.
Yeah.
Interesting. Now, yeah, Teddy, you have any questions in the?
Go ahead, Cindy, finish up.
Yep.
When we go to an interview, we typically don't want to sit directly across from somebody. That can be kind of intimidating, no matter who you are. So what you can do is kind of angle your chair just a little bit. And it's not so intense. So we can angle our chair a little bit. And remember that we don't have to keep staring at the camera the whole time. When we're thinking of something, we can look away, like we're remembering something or taking a minute to think, because remember the acronym, WAIT, all right? You've asked them a question. So now I want you to wait. Why am I talking? How many of us have gotten nervous and just started blathering on?
It's never happened to me.
So when it's our turn to speak, we want to be very succinct. We want to keep it very short.
Yeah.
Anytime you go over 3 minutes, people are going to start getting antsy.
So let me address some other Mindy's questions, and you addressed a lot of them already, Cindy. Mindy goes, should what kind of camera should we have? How should it be positioned? And you'll see that, Randy and Cindy and I, but all 3 of us have our cameras pretty much. Randy and Cindy have their cameras pretty much at eye level. Mine's a little bit higher because I'm in a standing office, and I have room for me to move around and walk behind. But you don't want that camera. You don't want that camera like this.
That's
right. You surely don't want that camera like this. And I've seen those interviews before, and they're not pretty. As that's freaking me out right this moment. So Yes. So position your camera at least just a little bit above your eyes. And you know what? Don't buy something to make this happen. If you've got a laptop and you got a bunch of old books, set your laptop on some old books and get it up there so it's eye level. If you have the ability to use a different keyboard, on my laptop, I have a keyboard off my laptop, so I don't have to be reaching up to my laptop to work. Make it comfortable for you. One more thing, your background. Don't put a bunch of time and money and effort into your background, but maybe use the virtual background like Sindy has. Maybe put up the Wizard of Oz curtain like Randy has. Or just clean up what's behind you so there's not a lot of bric-a-brac and what's the word, clutter behind you. It doesn't need to be magical. Randy?
Teddy and Sindy, I'm going to clue you in. We're about to have a world premiere.
Okay.
Right here, right now. Are you ready?
Oh, okay. Yes.
We've been doing this for a year now. And so now, Teddy, here's the big reveal.
It's too bright, man. Can't see it. That's the window, right?
It is so bright. And that is another point to bring up, that when the light is behind you, it looks good for you as somebody looking at your monitor, because you don't want to have bright light shining at you when you're trying to look at a monitor. You like light behind you or from above down. But think about what the other person is seeing. They're looking this way. And I will, instead of look red, I'll look like a dark silhouette, because this light is so flippin' bright behind me that I've got to do something to shade myself from that. So Sindy, you're the expert. I'm done. Have I talked long enough? So let's throw it back to you. What are some other things we need to know about when it comes to Zoom?
I like what you guys said about the clutter behind you. That is, that says a lot of things, that you're disorganized, poor time management. I mean, there's so many things that clutter can do. And we can be cluttered in our verbal parts too. And that's adding in those filler words, the ums, the ahs, like, knows. When you start using like this and like that, they are going to put you in a category, especially if you have got to use the phone a lot in talking with people, or you're going to be talking to people in person, calling on their customers. They want you to be able to have really good diction, to speak in a very good tone. Your pitch doesn't go up and down. Again, that's another one of those micro ways that they know when you're telling the truth or not. Whether your pitch raises up can show that you're showing various different types of emotions. So we've got to be careful to match the person that we're talking to. And they're looking at all of that. If they see something go askew, they're going to try to pry more into that.
I interviewed a guy a few years ago. It's been 11 now, and I was interviewing him for not quite an executive role, but an upper level management role. And all the words out of his mouth were, lots of slang, lots of, very comfortable, dude, man, this is cool stuff, man, this rocks. And I'm interviewing him for a public facing role. And so I asked him, I said, hey, I get it. You and I are comfortable with each other now. But you're using words that I wouldn't expect you to use if you're talking to our executive level clients. He said to me, oh, I know when to use the right words, but he didn't show that to me.
Yeah. Teddy, you know what? We're about halfway past the hour. Why don't we do the half past, and then we'll continue on. And by the way, if you have questions for Sindy or comments, please put them in the chat box. Teddy, you'll keep an eye on that, and we'll keep this conversation going.
Cool. Hey, thanks a lot for joining us again. I'm Teddy Burriss. This is my friend, Mr. Randy Wooden, and our special guest of the day is Sindy Martin I need to make sure I don't say it right. Her website is smarten-up.com, and I'll give that to you as well. And the conversations are all about presentation, professionalism, etiquette, in interviews and conversations, and including those virtual interviews that are run by robots that look at everything we do and everything we say and how we say it. So Randy, back to you, buddy.
Well, yeah, and Cindy, I'm going to throw one at you here, and you can take this or punt it away if you'd rather. You're known to me and to many others as the etiquette professional. When it comes to etiquette, do you ever feel like you're always on stage?
Absolutely.
And
because I sit down to anybody, they say.
I always wonder that, and you get people that are grammar people or editors and such, that I know when I write a column, I know that my writing style, I try to make it as though I'm speaking to somebody and not trying to emulate William F. Buckley or George Will and bust out a thesaurus where I know what the words mean, but the audience may not gather that. And I think there's that relatability thing. So that combination of, as you said earlier, can they do the job, and will they do it? Will they fit in? Do I feel comfortable with that person? I think that's always a key element, and bonding, again, speech patterns and any number of things we can look to do to try to kind of fit in here a little bit without being phony. And I guess that's a big thing too. We've probably all seen the phony. My Mrs. Cleaver, what a lovely house you remember that from back in the day. All right, so let's move back to the AI topic. We've talked about face-to-face interviews and Zoom interviews where people can see you, they can see the hands, they can see all this. So now there's nobody on the other side of that camera. There's not a live body. So what are some, if you will, regulations, or are there any kind of, you can't do this if you're a company when you interview, or do you have it? What if you'd rather not be interviewed by an artificial intelligence mechanism? Because that can intimidate people. Do you have an out if you're a candidate? Yeah, any out?
Well, by law, they have to tell you that, you're going to have that type of interview. They can't just spring it on you. They have to tell you whether or not it's in person or not. If it is an AI interview and you have some type of speaking impediment, or you have a foreign language, you've got that accent, or maybe the cadence of your voice is different, that can make a difference with AI. And you can say that to them. You'd say, my preference is not to have an AI interview. I don't feel that I interview well with those. What happens with AI is they are really looking at that facial recognition. AI is going to spot those micro expressions that we were talking about. And it's going to note that in the notes that get printed out after that interview. And remember, it's recorded as well, but AI is going to have those notes to the side. They showed anger. They showed fear. They showed surprise when that question was asked. So that's something that is going to happen. Now, understand, when you're in a regular interview, they're watching those things too, because we want you to be your best self, not your fake self. And to be your best, you were going to say something, Teddy?
Finish up.
So you always want to answer, okay? When an AI is asking those questions, you don't get to say, oh, and can I tell you a little bit more about that? No, they're already on to the next question. So you've got to be very succinct, and you've always got to answer it with that thought in your mind. What's in it for them? It's not about you. What can you do for the company? What value are you bringing? So that's how, those are the ways that you've got to answer those questions when you're not in front of a human being.
Cool. And I'm with you, Cindy. Here's and I did a little research a few years back when one of our mutual HR professionals in the Triad started providing that service to his clients to do video interviews. And by the way, back then they didn't have the artificial intelligence they have now. And just if anybody's curious about this, artificial intelligence interviews do not stop for a minute and get a glass of water. They're staring at you in every way they can. Cindy, just a quick little add on to that. I'd love for you to add. How can someone be best prepared to take on one of those artificial intelligence interviews? What would you suggest they do?
Well, just like we would do for any interview, we want to practice.
Yeah.
Go out there on the web. We know that there's questions for interviews. Now there's a list of AI questions for the AI interview, and you want to go through those. So when they're still going to ask you those behavioral questions, right? So that's where you're not going to be able to do this 20-minute story of how you did something. When they ask you a behavioral question, tell me about a time when you had somebody on the team that wasn't working well with everyone else. What did you do? That's where you have got to practice that situation, task, action, result. What was it? What did you do? What was the action? What was the result? Boom, boom, boom. That's how we've got to answer it.
Yeah. And we used to practice by staring at our bathroom mirror. Or now we can get on our own Zoom call, get on your own Zoom call and hit the freaking record button. Randy?
Absolutely.
We can. In an interview, I compare a lot of things to sports and dating in the job search. And the dating part is the compatibility issue. Do I like this person? Do I trust them? Do I like their character? And part of that during the interview process is all of what you talked about. It's all about what you talked about, meaning the tone of voice and so forth. But part of that I believe is missing. So I'd like to get your thought on this. With AI, they ask a question, they shut down, you talk, you're done. They ask a question, they shut up, you talk, you're done. In an interview, it's a give and take. It's at the end of my answer, I may ask a follow-up question. It becomes a discussion, I guess, versus what I'll call almost like a punching bag where they just fire shot after shot. I answer and try not to get bloody. And then at the end, maybe they'll let me ask questions. Do they even let you ask questions very often in an AI interview? And if so, what do you ask them?
They do.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they don't understand what you're asking. So you just do the best that you can. But they're improving it. They're improving it as they go along. So
I got two, Randy.
Yeah, I see him over here. Yeah.
So Michael Joyce, hey Michael, good to see you on here today, buddy. Michael says, does Cindy have a handout that lists the micro expressions and gestures?
I do, and I can send it to you later.
Yeah,
Randy.
Drop it to me, Cindy, and I'll drop it on the YouTube video for people to get a hold of. So, and Robert says he's hired folks before who were great at the interview. Awesome interviewers, okay?
Yep.
And his question is, any hints on how to see through people who have practiced and can be a great interview so we hire past first impressions and maybe get past those that are serious underperformers?
Yes, and one of the things, that's why behavioral questions have come up. That's the main reason that we went to that format, so that we could get a little bit more of what they're doing. And as I just said, if they're practicing their star of how they're going to answer that, what you want to do is ask them a question that they would not have prepared for, especially personal ones, because I think that when we're trying to build a trust. That's the first thing, as Randy just said, we're trying to build that trust, and we're gauging that on how you're speaking to us. So if I notice something, if I notice one of those micro expressions when you've talked about, maybe it's something about why you moved to this city, I'm going to explore that just a little bit more. I'm going to go off the map, not out of my HR rules, mind you, but I'm going to go off of that and go, tell me again, what brought you here? What brought you to this area? Was that a job? Do you know?
You ever find sometimes that people do things that are distracting and even maybe annoying when you're on Zoom meetings and so forth?
I've never seen that happen, Randy.
Just wondering. I asking for a friend actually, but yeah.
And that's something that people have a habit of doing. If you'll notice, people even in meetings, they are typically playing with a pen. And what you're showing is, number one, nervousness. Number two, insecurity. Number three, depending on what you cover up. One of our most vulnerable areas is right here at the neck, the dimple of your neck. We all have one, the dimple of our neck. So if we're covering that up, we're protecting ourselves. Now, we may be sitting in an open stance and doing everything else, but if we cover that up or we cover our mouth up, something's up. And it's always those gestures, and it's intuitive. You don't have to study body language. That's intuitive. You know something's not right. But in answer to that question, explore something that they wouldn't have practiced for.
Yeah.
Sindy, we've got another 5, 6, 7 minutes to cover some other topics that we like, and we're going to ask you to summarize for a bit, and then Teddy and I will make up something at the end. I never know what I'm going to say. I never know what I'm going to say until it comes out, and then probably half the time I wish I hadn't said it. But unless there are other questions, and I'm not seeing any, I'd like to pivot unless we have other questions about. Yeah, here's one.
Todd. Yeah, Todd's suggesting that we button up our shirt and hide the gold chain, and that may not be the words that Todd shared, but
That's not where the gold thing.
yeah.
Well,
No,
here's
but
where, yeah, go ahead.
though, Randy, when Sindy, when you said, and you're right, I did a post on this morning. I did a video this morning about telling stories, and the quote that I wrote down from a buddy of mine from a couple of days ago during a chat is, you don't need to market yourself, just tell stories. And then I added to that and said, the best ad does not look like an ad.
Right.
Same thing for interviews. You gotta have stories. So if you're going to tell a story that supports your value, your skills, your accomplishments, and why I would be a great fit for this team, you best make sure that the people that you ask for references. When I call Randy and you, Sindy, and say, hey, look, I got this guy named Robert, he's gonna call you and ask for a reference. You need to know that I told the story about how I did this, and I think that resonated with him, so that your story can be supported by your references. Yes, ma'am.
Let me tell you what the best interviewers do. They call one of the references that you have listed, and they ask you the name of another coworker that you haven't listed, and that's what they talk to.
Yeah. Yep, I'm with you.
There you go.
Yes, ma'am.
Hey, look, if we don't have any other specific questions regarding the whole Zoom thing, I want to pivot just a little bit. COVID has changed a lot of stuff, including handshakes. So where does that stand? Hey, do you ever see us doing handshakes again in the next year or so, or is that kind of gone away? What do you think? What's your thought on it?
I absolutely see us keeping handshakes. If someone does not want to, then we will respond with the elbow or whatever. But I do not see handshakes going away. And that goes back to our body language. When we talk to someone in building trust, especially we're introduced to somebody, we are interested in them. The body language is the most important thing. That handshake is the first physical touch. The next thing that we're going to do is maybe they said something funny like Teddy and Randy always do. And I'm going to touch their arm and say, oh, you're just so funny. Because that touch is so important and it impresses us. That's something that we're looking for. The other thing is when we're in front of someone, especially when we're shaking hands, then we are completely aligned with them. We're looking at them. Our belly button is facing them. Our feet are forward facing them. And that means we want to meet them, because if our belly button is facing away, my face is forward, but my belly button's not, I don't want to talk to you. I'm ready to go, especially my feet will go. What happens naturally, and this goes back to how our micro expressions happen, our body expressions. When we're done talking with somebody, our foot naturally goes out. Watch people's feet. Remember the old story, head, shoulders, knees, and toes? Watch those toes. The first time that foot goes out, they're done talking to you.
Yeah.
That's where you're supposed to say, I can see that you're busy and I'm going to let you go now.
Yeah. So our mystery guest, our mystery attendee, Galaxy A6, who by the way is no longer mysterious to me. Galaxy A6 says, I want to know, is it okay to overdress for an interview? Even though the interviewer might be wearing jeans and a ripped up t-shirt, and that's not the words he used. Cindy, thought?
One of my clients is Ralph Lauren. And when you go over to Ralph Lauren, everybody has jeans on. They wear flip-flops and shorts and everything else. When I went, I was dressed up. You can only make an impression once. If they say to you, oh, gosh, you didn't have to wear a tie, I'll say, hey, this is my first impression. I want to put on a good impression. Now, here's the other thing, though, back to the body languages, but don't be pulling at that tie or don't be pulling at your shirt, because that's going to show that you're nervous or uncomfortable.
Do you have any other tips? We've got just a couple minutes left here for you on this before we ask you to summarize on some takeaways you'd like folks to have. Other things, things like when should I show up at the office for the interview? How far in advance? Or just any other thoughts, just some general tips you can rattle off.
Right. Well, we all know that being on time is being late. You want to show up a minimum of 15 minutes in advance. If you are doing a Zoom call, be there 15 minutes in advance. It is what is expected. So 15 minutes, 10 at the latest. You do not want to jump on there and have trouble. Okay. You don't want to go to an interview and not be able to find the place that you're supposed to go. So you want to be there 15 minutes in advance. There's no excuse for late. We all have cell phones. If something happens, you call. You make sure you get the number of the person that you're interviewing with so that if something comes up, you can call.
You know, that show up before, Randy and I do it every time. Randy and I show up here usually almost 30 minutes ahead of schedule to get ready, make sure we know what we're doing. And Randy teaches me what I need to know to be able to do it right or do it as best as I can. When you're doing a Zoom call for an interview, maybe not so much with the AI bot, you want to show up at least 10 minutes before the bot does, so you can be prepared and make sure you get set up right. But if you're doing a live Zoom or Teams interview, show up 15 minutes early. Here's some value to that. You may be able to get a intimate conversation with the interviewer before it goes live, intimate being a professional, intimate one-on-one conversation. And you can develop a level of trust, respect, and like before the interview starts. And that can get you an advantage. Randy?
Absolutely. If you're the host, you're supposed to get on 30 minutes early and stay on 30 minutes after. It is the best time to network.
Yep.
Yeah, and I could count on one hand the times that I've seen that happen. And so to include me. I mean, as far as I don't know that I've ever done that 30 minutes after, 30 minutes before, but I don't have team meetings where I'm the host. I'm the attendee. And then when we're done and we move on to the rest of our day. But I agree with you. I think we have lost that sense of connectedness largely that we'd have if we were in the same building or shaking hands and that kind of a thing. So this whole technology, you don't see this going away, do you, Cindy? This whole work from home.
It is so convenient. We will feel more comfortable now, especially with our clients, because they're busy. And you'll say, hey, would you like to have a coffee? We can do a Zoom, or I can come to your office. Which would you prefer? And that's another thing to confirm when you're on an interview. How do they want to be communicated with? Do they text? Do they want an email, or do they want a phone call? Don't ever assume.
Yep. Teddy, you going to take one more and have Cindy
I'm going to take Patricia.
Yep.
Patricia dropped in here.
And we'll do the summary.
What advice do you have for the first day of work being remote? Anybody have thoughts?
The first day of work being remote?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I'd want to have a meeting with my boss. Can we have a Zoom so I can meet some of my coworkers?
Yeah.
And even not with the boss, just the coworkers, so that you can learn the hidden rules.
Yeah. Discover expectations. And just like you said earlier, Cindy, you might have some, old goat like Randy who doesn't want you texting him. He wants you sending him emails, and you might be working with some, spry old goat like me who's happy with Snapchat messages. Right. You need to know who all the people are, the best way to engage with them.
Absolutely. And that applies to everybody. That applies to your friends too.
Yeah. It does. And Sindy, now we're kind of at that point in the show where we like to ask our guests to summarize and give a handful of maybe takeaways you'd like folks to have as they go about their day.
Be your best self. You know, a lot of people will say, well, I'm just gonna be me. This is who I am. I'm coming in my jeans and my t-shirt because that's who I am. No, you need to be your best self. You need to be professionally authentic. Okay. Not just yourself, but professionally authentic so that they see that good impression that you're giving. Be aware of yourself. If you are authentic with yourself, you're going to be authentic with them. Know what subjects upset you, what can make you fearful, what can bring contempt, what can make you angry, because then you need to work on that up here. You need to be able, when they say something, that you don't get upset, you think of those positive things, because you're trying to build trust with that person. Again, they're trying to figure out, can you do the job and will you do the job? And how you answer all these things is very important. They don't want to see something other than what you're saying. You say, oh, I love doing that, or I've been doing that a long time. Sounds like you're tired of it.
Good stuff.
All right. Any other takeaways you'd like folks to have? Anything? Yeah.
Etiquette is so important. Don't ever think that it's just something that your grandma did. Not so. We notice it in everyone. Start paying attention of what you notice and then look at yourself.
Yeah.
Teddy, I've got a trivia question for you. Sindy knows the answer, and I kind of remember because Sindy told me, but I'm old and I don't remember much. But what you talked about ties, the power tie, the red tie. So, Teddy, here's a trivia question for you. Do you know why ties have stripes?
That's right.
Sindy told me this a long time ago.
So that when you spill mustard on there, you can blend it into a stripe?
That was my guess, but that would not be correct, Teddy. So do you have a better guess? Why do stripes? Why do they have stripes? That's a toughie. And I threw that at him.
Wait a minute, Randy. Does anybody on here know the answer?
So, okay, nobody knows the answer, but Sindy does. And so this is an interesting little thing. I heard this years ago from Sindy. What you got there? What's the answer on that one?
So what happened is, back in the old days when we had our clans, we had either a fox or a bear or a cat skin that they wore across their shoulder to let them know what clan they were in. As we went forward, they started having plaids and things of that nature. But what happened is they had one knife. And after they used that knife, whether it was for food or killing animals or killing people, they wiped it on that skin or that fabric. Consequently, it made those lines. And that's what we have copied with the ties.
So are you telling me that my tie with 36 stripes means something different than the one I have with 5 stripes?
That's right.
Sindy, thank you very much for coming on today.
Yeah, thank you, Sindy. We always learn stuff every time, and I've told the story many times. So Teddy, I'll jump in with my story, and it's a rerun. But the first time I met Sindy, we had lunch together, and I was self-employed, she's self-employed, and so we were thinking about, okay, well, how could we maybe help each other in some way? And I've never met her, and vice versa. So we got together, and anyway, so we had lunch. But here I am with the etiquette queen across the table from me. And so I'm wondering, did I spill anything? The food here, what the whole deal. And anyway, so at the end I said, hey, Sindy, I said, how did I do today? And you said, do you remember that?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
He did really great. Wiped his mouth with his napkin, kept his napkin in his lap, but he had his knife touching the table and the plate at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah.
That
I didn't know that.
Goes on the back of the plate with the serrated side facing in. And the reason for that goes back to the cloth part. They used to have one knife. It was extremely sharp. If it was facing out and you went to go grab your ale, you could slice your hand open.
So Robert wants you to provide him other resources that validates the tie story.
Oh, okay.
We'll get that and we'll put it on the show notes. So,
Yeah. We'll get the crack research staff on that one and we'll hunt that down for you. But no, I don't really have a lot of stories. Just to let you know that
you get ready. You get ready to introduce our speaker for next week, buddy.
We'll do. You want to go now then?
I'll go now. You gotta get your notes. Do you have your notes?
It's right here.
Wait a minute. You're almost always doing this, buddy.
It's also here.
Okay, just checking. I just want to make sure you still have your tools. You guys will get a kick out of this.
Sharp as a tack.
Yeah, Randy and I have been.
It may look like a lobster, but I sharp as a tack.
We have been working hard at putting the technology together to make this show more efficient. Have we not, buddy?
We did. Yes.
A lot of work. We got it going though. It's all going. Hey, here's my story. Practice. And I would wager that if I ask you guys to tell me what practice makes, that most people are going to know, they're going to say the same thing. Most people are going to say practice makes perfect. And that is not the case. You don't want to be perfect. You want to be striving to get better every single time. Practice makes permanent. When you get set up, Randy's got his office set up. He's got his notes, his talking pad right here. He's got all that in front of him. He's got his computer set up. He's got his ball so he can, use that when he needs to. I got my baseball bat. Practice. You show up with all the things and you bring all the things that you need to bring to the conversation. And if you want to get better at interviewing, I cannot overstate this. Practice. Get your laptop fired up, turn your camera on, record your Zoom session, and put your talking points in front of you. Ask yourself a question and pretend to be the interviewer. And you can be as goofy as you want about pretending to be an interviewer, or as professional as you want about being an interviewer, and then change roles and become Teddy, the interviewee. And let me answer that question for you. Practice makes permanent. And if you're not practicing, you are missing out on the opportunity to be better. Randy, back to you, buddy.
Yeah, Teddy, I'm going to ask Sindy in terms of follow-up. If people wanted to follow up to learn more about you or what you do, maybe Teddy can put that in the show notes, and we can also put that on. I'll put out a promo after the show with the link to our YouTube. So if there's anything you'd like to have shared, please do. I know you give talks to groups and so forth. So if you've got that, then let us know. So earlier on today, we got into the topic a little bit, which sort of dovetails into our next week's show. The topic you said was we're almost like we're hardwired to do things. We don't necessarily, it's reflexive. It's us. Yeah. And there's neuroscience that goes on in the study of everything from all these expressions but also within the brain and how we think and how we process what makes us angry, what makes us fearful, all of those things. And so that works nicely. Next week, Dr. Melissa Hughes, she's in Florida. So our show extends across the states, Teddy. We are global, but
wait, it's Florida in the US?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I had to look it up earlier, but yeah, it's south of Rhode Island, somewhere down there. Anyway, she was a school teacher years ago and became fascinated and probably a little frustrated, and I'll have her explain it. But in terms of, okay, testing is one thing, but how do people learn, and how can we best get people to not just to hear it, but to absorb it and retain it? And so she went on to study neuroscience. She's, again, a doctor, TED Talk. She's done those. She's an author and has a great sense of humor. So we're going to learn about managing the stress of uncertainty. And we're also going to learn about something that, in all honesty, I hadn't heard of until she mentioned it. And then I thought, no, wait, I've heard of it. I just really hadn't heard it in that term before. And that's called the Imposter Syndrome. What is it? What can we do about it? What brings it on? How can we deal with it? But again, all this stuff, I can't even spell some of the words that she has in her title and all that stuff. But again, I was a liberal arts guy, but she will really let us know what goes on in the brain and how that impacts how we process and how we deal with those things externally coming at us. So it's going to be fascinating. And we hope you'll join us next week. Teddy, take us
And
home.
remember
Anything?
this, on April 7th,
Yeah.
we are having our anniversary show. We had to root through and dig through 40 some odd special guests to come up with 10 special guests to hang out with us. It's going to be a 90-minute show. It'll be a little bit of funner. It'll be a little bit of reminiscing, and we promise you lots of value. And so if you know anybody that would be interested in hearing the conversations that we share, please introduce us to them. Hunt us down on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, on the internets, and give us some social love. Subscribe to the channel, like our videos, and let your friends know that you found this wild group of two guys that bring in really special people, our special guests, to share with you. It's 101. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Cindy, thank you.
Have a great week. Thanks, Cindy. See you.